ママ、今日はどっちへ行くの？西に行こうと思うの。あの辺はまだそんなに慣れてないから。頑張ってね。ありがとう、エイジ。
Deine Freundin möchte ich nicht mehr kennenlernen. Die ist so pervers ist, sowas aus Spaß anzugucken.
夢はまだまだ終わらない。
Oh, das tut gut. Oh ja. Oh, ich bin geil.
That wasn't quite in sync. Can we do it again with a little more effort, please?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Hours and hours of content.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we become Patreon subscribers. Also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for over 2 years. There's something like 50-plus bonus episodes waiting for anyone who hasn't made the jump yet, as well as our now kind of semi-regular bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, which we are in the current state of things. We have a lot of time for them, but they are starting to release less and less of them, obviously. So we are going to run out of some, but if you are interested in, hearing us talk about any new release films, what did we talk about recently? We did, like, Eric Andre's Bad Trip. We did that terrible Sundance horror film, The Lodge.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods coming up soon, which I already saw on Netflix, and which is very good.
Yeah, we're covering Crazy World. I can't remember the guy's name.
Ugandan. Nabwana Igigi.
Nice, yeah. It was so entertaining.
Yeah, very excited to talk about some Ugandan homemade action cinema, which is a lot of fun. So if you want any of those bonus episodes or any of those bonus transmission shows that we do, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have 3 people make the jump this month.
Awesome.
Or I guess this week. We had the Bicameral Productions is one. We had Ian Keys and Malcolm Barnes. So thanks so much to you guys for signing up. Hope you guys are enjoying all of those bonus episodes. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know a lot of you are, scroll down to the very bottom while you're listening to this right now and give us a good old rating and review. Helps us climb the ranks over on iTunes and helps us find new listeners that way as well.
Yes, please.
We appreciate that. Anyway, those are the plugs for the week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you guys, free listeners, would have heard from us, and we would have been talking about the Coen brothers, Bart and Fink, from 1991, as well as Robert Benton's Bad Company from 1972. 2 films that were two favorite films by our guest who joined us, writer and director Josh Trank of Chronicle and Fantastic Four, and more recently Capone with Tom Hardy. He brought those 2 films on because they are 2 of his personal favorite films, and also they both served as inspiration because of that, obviously, on his new film Capone. So we had a lot of fun talking about that. I'm just very glad that somewhere in the stratosphere is Josh Trank on our podcast saying "fuck Max Landis" at one point.
I was just gonna say that. Oh man, yeah, it's. I'm very proud of our show.
Yeah, so we, sometimes we get to do fun things on this show like that. So we had a great time talking with Josh Trank, and then last week for the bonus episode, we did. Took a little bit of a pivot and kind of preparing ourselves for today's episode. We wanted to get into the mode of a little bit more transgressive cinema. So we talked about Roger Watkins's Last House on a Dead-End Street from 1977, but actually shot around 1971, 1972, which features a live dismemberment where the they use smelling salts on the woman who is being dismembered to keep her as awake as possible, and it's basically a surreal manifesto on screen violence by Roger Watkins, and it has a great bit where he gets to yell into the camera that he's the fucking director, and you're watching his movie and he's in control.
Just keep looking at all this crazy shit.
Yeah, so if you like sort of like really cheap, low budget horror, and I guess that movie also started about as a Manson biopic at one point.
I believe
that's the film for you. But then we also talked about Donald Cammell's White of the Eye alongside of it, which is a little bit more
very strange,
sad and personal and strange film. It's basically an American giallo film that just goes like full insanity with the depth of its serial killer character in the last like 30 minutes, and I think we ended up having like a really good chat about that one, especially how it relates to the filmmaker's headspace and eventual suicide just a couple years after making the film.
Yeah. Very sad.
So either way, not the easiest episode to listen to, but if that episode appeals to you,
it kind of blew my mind.
That was last week's bonus episode. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for that one. But this week, continuing in the realm of kind of disgusting, transgressive, low budget cinema, we have special guest Sam Bodrojan joining us, who I've followed on Twitter for a very long time. She is a sometimes shit poster, sometimes film writer, sometimes combination of the two in a lot of fun ways. But Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing so good. I'm happy to be here. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Doing as well as we can. Once again, calling in from the quarantine zone. We've been doing this for months. I haven't seen Jamie in months. I'm getting a little sad about it. We used to watch Blu-rays over here when we were watching some of the films sometimes. So, but we're pushing through, and we're pushing through especially by watching a bunch of things that melt our brains, which you were a big help in this week.
Oh yeah, very big help.
So Sam, as it goes, the guests bring on the two films of choice. So which two films have you brought with you this week, and why did they pair together?
Hi. So this week I have brought with me two films. One is Nekromantik 2 by Jörg Buttgereit, which is about a woman who basically wants to have sex with and falls in love with a corpse, and then also tries to balance that with a relationship with a human man, and who is, very fully alive. And then the other film by Hisayasu Sato is Splatter, Naked Blood. That one's 1996, and that one is about a scientist who tampers with his mother's experiment to give 3 women a drug that turns pain into pleasure. And the two, besides forming sort of a nice predominantly green, predominantly red sort of contrast, sort of fall under the umbrella of the gnarliest corner of what I like to think of as films about sexual immolation. Basically, where desire becomes a sacrifice within yourself to sort of change your entire body because of some all-consuming longing made physical.
There you go. I mean, I definitely see it for sure. That's a better introduction than I expected. So we are going to, I think, just jump straight into it. We are going to start off here with the slightly more popular of the two. We are going to start with Nekromantik 2, and maybe a brief digression into the original Nekromantik for anyone who's maybe unfamiliar with these ones. right, we are talking Nekromantik 2, the 1991 German horror film directed by Jörg Buttgereit, and is a sequel to his 1987 debut film, Nekromantik. Both films take on, as you can probably tell by the title, necrophilia as their subject, but then sort of apply this very open, controversial kind of gore element to it that is a little bit inspired by Fulci, but also doesn't quite have the surrealist element that I find in Fulci, or that kind of like metaphysical quality. It takes on a more direct bodily and psychological point of view, which is interesting. And I really because we were jumping straight into a sequel, I obviously had to go back and watch the first film. But let's just say I was not prepared for.
Yeah, don't eat food during these films that we're about to discuss. I think, and in fact, if you try, it's impossible. So.
Yeah, Jamie did try.
I did try. With all three movies I tried, and I failed miserably. And usually I'm okay. I'm starting to get used to all the just craziness that comes from doing this show. But every once in a while we still get those curveballs, and this is definitely one of those weeks.
Can I tell you how proud I am that I made you guys a little queasy, with my choices? It makes me so proud. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what we're looking for.
It takes a lot. We're pretty desensitized to a lot of the stuff that we've seen, but there were definitely moments in both of these films that got to me, and first among them in the first Nekromantik film. I was a little bit more prepared by the time I got to the second one.
Yeah.
Even though it also still had some shocking moments in it, and I mean especially the bathtub scene,
and how
in that one just goes on forever.
How slow and methodic, especially the second one is. Like it shows everything from like her digging up the body, like with every detail, to taking it into the apartment, to unwrapping it, to all of it. It's very focused on the the procedure of getting the body and then having sweet love with it.
Yeah,
that's sweet.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was one thing I was going to say about both of these, is that as sort of indicated by the music by Herman Kopp in both of these films, they both do kind of take on a genuinely romantic angle. I think more the second one seems to be that the primary focus of it is actually just a person trying to balance like a real life romantic relationship, which even has like these very sort of like cute little date scenes and things like that.
It seems like the first one, it actually, like, the couple seems to only have happiness when they have sex with the body in the one scene, and then everything else, it seems like their relationship just kind of decays. Whereas this one is like, it's almost like she's trying to find a love that isn't a dead body, but she realizes that she really can't, I guess, something along those lines.
Yeah, well, and also I would say, too, that the first one, the character being a street sweeper is kind of important, too, that there is, like, actual, like, arguments about, like, money in that film. There is a little bit of a kind of working class angle to the guy being a street sweeper, and it's funny that they also connected that's how he gets the bodies, is because he's a street sweeper who has to like sort of like clean up the garbage on the streets. Sometimes that involves like bodies that get into car accidents, for example, which is how they find a body, and then they take the bodies back to their apartment and they use them as sort of like sex toys, pretty much. And when they put like the steel rod to make the penis inside the corpse so that it was erect, and then they started putting a condom over it, you kind of get like where it's going at a certain point. but the score and like the filmmaking, weirdly enough, is actually sort of romantic while it's while we're seeing these like repulsive images and textures. And I will say that I thought one of our patrons, Kai Perignon, had a great write-up about the first film, where he says that Jorg makes subtle swipes at sort of like bougie morality as we watch these like working class people forced to toil for nothing to the point where they seem to internalize the condescension until they find pleasure in like the literal concept of decay. Which was something that he wrote about the film that kind of stuck out to me, and which obviously becomes very literalized in people like wanting to fucking romantically be involved with rotting flesh. So like that, it definitely seems to be a little bit of an angle of the first one, and then the second one moves into taking that romance even a step further, and kind of getting us more into the POV. Because like I guess it's just weird because the first one has like, it does have the POV element of a someone who is into necrophilia, but like there's something sort of destructive and a little bit sad by the end of the film. Especially as the guy is gutting himself, and he's so turned on by it that he's also ejaculating all over himself.
And
then ejaculating blood.
Which I didn't think. I thought the only movie that had that was Antichrist, but apparently
Lars stole it.
There's more. Yeah, Lars stole it. I couldn't believe it.
Lars
I'm like,
stole
oh my
most
God.
things.
That's what I'm coming to find out watching this show, is that all the people that I respect today are basically just stealing all the underground craziness that happened in the 70s and 80s. So
I have like an immense amount of perverse affection for Lars, specifically Nymphomaniac, for very similar reasons for the two films today. But yeah, he's a dirty little bastard thief.
I'm sure he would love to hear you say that too.
I am sure he would. I love that is the opening for Nekromantik 2. So Nekromantik 2 has two things in the opening. First, it opens with a Ted Bundy quote, which is sort of a misleadingly edgelord kind of choice. But I think it does work. So it's some Ted Bundy quote like, "I want to master life and death," which I don't know, take it or leave it, really. But I think what's very valuable about that is it's sort of examining Ted Bundy not as some sort of perverse serial killer at the center of some sort of massive true crime sensationalist narrative, but a figure for young girls, I think, because the people who loved Ted Bundy were impressionable young girls, and I think it sort of sets that up for Nekromantik 2 when you cut from the scene that's also in the first Nekromantik, where you have sort of the guy Rob jizzing and cutting himself open, right? And it like the cum turns into blood in like this really wonderfully angled shot, and it's just like it's probably the most shocking violence in the whole film, which is funny because it doesn't even come from that film originally, and then it shifts into something much more tender and much sweeter, which I think is sort of the key to why I love this film. So it starts with her, this woman who you don't even really see at first. She's sort of, this whole opening passage is almost shot in these insert shots or point of view shots, and it feels very beautiful. You can feel the heat outside. You can feel the dirt. There are all these shots of like little bugs in the ground, and it's like, it's almost tunnel vision in how blindingly narrow her focus is and how present the camera is in the experience of what's happening. And what's happening is she's digging up this dead body and bringing it home.
Yeah, and notably also it's the dead body of Rob, who is the guy who did the gutting ejaculation move in the opening credits, which is I think why they show it, because Rob then became a bit of a tabloid sensation as a necrophiliac who killed himself, and everyone found out what they were doing in his apartment. And they even have shots of like the tabloid headlines that the main girl, I think her name is Monica here, that she keeps in her place as well. So this is presumably, I think they're setting up that that's how she heard about him. And it's unclear. It's unclear whether she had these feelings herself and were exploring them already before Rob, or she was slightly inspired by reading about Rob, or it's left kind of unclear, but it's very clear that she read about Rob and has decided to exhume his body, and because he was into necrophilia, she's just like, well, clearly this is it's almost like she's seeking a consensual necrophilia experience, because here's a guy who was into it, so she's like, now I can bring him home and he can continue what he liked to do with me.
You think that's also kind of a take on just with that opening Ted Bundy line? He was also known to kind of manipulate the media as well. Do you think that might be kind of a play?
Could be something there for sure.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, because I knew that he had that whole thing where he was trying to be the charming man throughout the media, right? So, and that's kind of how he manipulated the young youth. So, yeah, I thought that might be a little take on it.
Definitely to go from a Ted Bundy quote to tabloid headlines in your first like 5 minutes of your film definitely could be something there.
Yeah.
But very quickly it's her exhuming the body and then basically trying to fulfill and satisfy her desires of necrophilia with the body, and it's so funny because like the scenes, as Sam has kind of pointed out, they in general I would say they are typically kind of filmed with a little bit of like romantic, but also just like a little bit of sensitivity for her, and also there's kind of a lightness to it, but then you're literally looking at images of her like wiping a slimy rotting corpse.
And that's the thing too, is that they don't try to make it, you know, appealing in any way when it comes to the actual like imagery. It's the music and the way the camera flows and the way that the edits go that makes it feel romantic, and like you're kind of like, you know,
right,
like someone falling in love and all that kind of stuff. But then you are watching like when she touches the face, like the goo just stretches, you know, and it's everything becomes connected, and it's just, oh my god,
it's this wonderfully
disgusting in that way.
Yeah, it is this wonderfully crafted gore where it almost feels like a clay sculpture or something, where it feels so tender, and they make the goo and stuff. The gore feels alive, not like it's meant to be squirting blood. It's not meant to have a direction, but sort of like it's pulsing, like it has a life to itself, because it's been so, like, obviously by the visual effects team for the film, has been so tenderly created. And I think what I love so much about Nekromantik 2 is that it is so fully open and vulnerable with Monica. And Monica, as an actress, she's only listed on like IMDb and stuff as Monica M. Her only credits are Nekromantik and Nekromantik 2. And I don't know what else she's been in, which is, I think, is very interesting to sort of have this be.
That's an awesome resume.
Yeah, right? Like I would.
Yeah, well, and I read briefly that the reason that she was picked by Jorg was because that she was a really big fan of Lucio Fulci films, and that I think he met her going to like some sort of revival screening at a movie theater. And she was like, it's very interesting that there is, like, you know, a woman very proudly here watching Fulci films with me. So basically just a weirdo, gross director being like, dang, here's the one woman who likes the same things as me and would probably be interested in making the films I'm interested in making because they're basically just as gross.
I don't know. Yes. Yeah. And, okay, not to, like, in coming to why these films mean a lot to me, something like Nekromantik 2... I don't know, I watched it as a teenager in high school and stuff, and I grew up on all of these very gnarly combinations of pornography and gore, right? Where I grew up on like She Killed in Ecstasy and Fascination and Blood Feast and all of these films that sort of revel in, and even stuff by John Waters to some extent, or Jack Smith or Kenneth Anger, list goes on, where they are sort of reveling in gore as a way to validate and express emotions and desires with tenderness. You know, they are not correct, and this is a world, you know, that is like, it's just like sleazy dirtbag shit, right? Like, I was not growing up on sort of the like nice, gentle Wattpad era. Like, I didn't grow up in that. Like, that's not what speaks to me. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I grew up in this gnarly stuff, this stuff that made bodies that were, you know, on their surface gross feel alive and feel viable. And I don't know, as a transsexual woman, I really connected with that. Even before I was out, I connected with the idea that your desires as they related to your body were seen as wrong, but were also real and valid. I don't know. That's what I sort of in this.
That's definitely the experience of like spending time with Monica in this film, is that like initially I feel like obviously because of the the angle of taking on necrophilia, which is something that, you know, visually can just repulse people so easily, viscerally on screen, but then for Jorg to just take it very seriously, like that's the one thing I think that I latched onto the most watching Jorg's films, is that I think he does get kind of accused a lot of being kind of just like someone who's just out to sort of shock people, and I could see why, especially with something like the end of the first Nekromantik, for example. I could see why he kind of has that reputation, but there was something to this one where you can just tell that they're taking Monica as a character and and her desire to just find some sort of satisfaction in life, like, quite seriously. Like, there are moments in this where, you know, she's trying to have a normal relationship, and she's at one point she actually completely ditches Rob's body in order to try and be like, I'm going to pursue a relationship with this living normal man, who also happens to be he works as a porn dubber in post-production, making all the absolutely awful sounds you might have heard in the movie theaters.
And he doesn't have enough passion, you know?
No.
They're just like, dude, you gotta sound like you're enjoying yourself a little bit more. And I thought, honestly, the way that was going and the way that it kept, as the relationship was kind of growing and all that, it would cut back to him doing the ADR for porn, and he would get better at it. And I honestly thought that the movie was going to go into this kind of like blowout angle in a sense, not necessarily like someone recording it, but you know, I thought maybe like he would discover that he also loved
it was going to connect to the
then,
production of porn,
and then he'd go into the ADR booth and just fucking kill it, thinking about a dead body or something like that. I mean, in a way, it almost happens because as they grow with their relationship, he does go into the ADR room and give a better performance. But unfortunately, it does lead to his ultimate demise. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just say that there's something so interesting about taking Monica's desires seriously to the point where, like, you are actually kind of sad when they have their first sex scene, and you can tell that, you know, she didn't really have a great time because it's not particularly what she's interested in, and she kind of chooses him a little bit because he is slightly interested, I guess, in being openly sexual and a little bit maybe more might be open to some of the things that she feels,
like,
but then
hanging him upside down and naked and taking photos.
Taking photos of him in ways that make him look like a corpse, and also maybe having movie nights where they watch a seal dissection video. Yeah,
and she tells him not to move during sex because she wants to imagine that he's a dead body, that kind of stuff. You know.
Yeah, and what was the great line that he gets? It's totally perverse to watch this stuff for fun.
Yeah,
is what he says.
That
to
was
her.
my review of the film. Basically, I'm like, that's how I feel whenever I watch these. But you know what? I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
I really love how many times there are like relationship compromises in this film that I think is really smart. Like even the scene where Mark and Monica meet, like Mark's supposed to be meeting someone else at the movie theater. Like, he is not supposed to be like, they see each other, and then they go on this wonderful carnival date. Which, can I digress about the carnival date, because I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
I love this like scene of witnessing this world, right, where, you know, and I'll get later on to digression in a digression to the sort of political ramifications of the film, but there is this incredibly gorgeous, tender scene where they wander around this carnival, and it is just a bunch of different shots of like skulls and animatronics and fake rock and all of this stuff that is meant to symbolize death but has instead been corrupted and malfunctions, right? Where you have just been confronted with this very real looking, very live vision of what death is. And it is physical. It has weight. You can sit next to it. You can wrap your arm around it. You can fuck it. But then to be confronted with something that is posited in a palatable way for your pleasure and is built for your pleasure, but you can't really interact with it in any sort of meaningful way. It is sort of a facade of a normal relationship. And it's filmed in the same way as, say, when she's going to dig up the body, where it is all of these insert shots and point of view shots, but it doesn't have the same feeling. And I think that is despite having a similar technique, and I think that is an interesting way to establish sort of a boredom with what is conventionally considered an acceptable romantic and societal relationship to death.
Oh, definitely.
And then, I mean, obviously the porn theater is great because this movie has a lot of interaction with porn. Because porn, you know, at least I disagree. I think porn is amazing, and I think porn performers and porn creators are some of the most imaginative and brilliant people in the world. But I do think in this film, it's sort of considered to be just like about what you're seeing. It's about what you're hearing. It's not about how you see it and how you hear it. In the context of Nekromantik 2, which is put in direct contrast with what you see when Monica is like romantically involved with Rob's corpse, which I think is doubly funny because I was reading, and the film, there's the parody of My Dinner with Andre that crops up at a couple points.
Yeah, they go to the art film together, and it's just like two people in black and white sitting at a table having the most boring conversation they could possibly be having, and he makes you watch it. He like basically films a parody of it and then just makes you sit there and watch it.
Isn't it also odd, like they're talking about birds that are going extinct while just eating eggs? Like I thought,
yeah, it's just nonsense. Like it seems like he's taken a bit of the piss out of them a little bit, and at the same time he cuts to that guy hitting his egg to then Mark cooking eggs for Monica in the apartment right afterward.
Right.
Yeah.
So it definitely connects to like there's something genuinely sort of like sweet and innocent happening between the two. It's just one of them also has some corpses in the closet, like literally. And Monica, I like, Sam, that you brought up the compromise, the relationship compromises, because that was actually one of the scenes that I was the most taken with, is the one where she compromises and decides that she can't have Rob's whole body in the apartment because Mark's going to be staying in the apartment now and like hanging out and, you know, having sex. And so she's got
to keep parts of him, of course.
Yeah, so she goes over to the bathtub and takes a hacksaw and just starts cutting
scene.
into the corpse, and it's just 5 to 10 minutes of her just literally cutting into Rob's corpse, with this very gory makeup, decapitating him because she wants to take the head, but then also taking out in what is one of the best gags I've ever seen that had me howling. She takes out a tiny hacksaw, which I was like, do they even sell tiny hacksaws? I was like, I didn't know this was a
It's
thing.
like Looney Tunes.
Takes out the smallest hacksaw. Yeah, the smallest hacksaw you've ever seen, and uses it on his penis. So she takes the penis, she takes the head, because those are the two things that she wants to keep the most from his body. And this scene also, too, reminded me, actually, of Abel Ferrara's Miss 45, when she tries to cut the body into pieces of her rapist and stuff them down the drain. And then there's the image in that film that we talked about when we covered that film about like the flesh regurgitating out of the drain and popping back up because she can't quite get rid of it.
Right.
Like that stain is still there.
I love Miss 45 so much. Damn.
Yeah. The fact that
That's great.
this had me thinking about Miss 45 is definitely praise from me.
She also, excuse me, when she rips off the head or cuts off the head, she starts to also like just go into the neck and play with the blood and stuff. Like she's once again, it's like she's constantly intrigued and falling in love more and more with death and gore and all that.
It's such a
that
tender and imaginative moment to sort of consider, even in traditional quote unquote sex scenes, you don't necessarily get all of the intimacies of how people like play with their hair or touch or feel one another. There's nothing that specific. And then here in this situation that is, I don't know, I don't encounter necrophilia a lot in the movies I watch, despite this, right? And you get this very specific way that she is caressing him. It feels very intimate. It feels very much like something that she is sharing with, this dead corpse. And I think that the scene in the bathtub is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. I think it is hilarious. Like it's genuinely funny, without being condescending. And I think the film is not often funny, even though it is often ridiculous. But
like Seal Dissection Movie Night is also definitely a genuine gag.
And like they're watching like the most detailed dissection of a seal just being ripped apart, and then they'll cut to them like just casually eating pizza and shit, like it's just a completely normal thing. And it's gross just to watch like that than food. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, and also another way that it connects to food is also the morning after they have sex for the first time. And she was clearly left sort of like dissatisfied, and Rob gets up and goes to the fridge to go and grab some breakfast, and he pulls out a plate that has Rob's rotting genitals on it from the fridge, and he looks at it like 3 or 4 times. He's like, is this... Yeah. All right. And then he starts going to all his friends being like, I think the girl that I'm seeing is like into some strange things. She might be perverse. And I love that they all laugh at him, and they were like, dude, you dub porn movies and you're calling someone like someone perverse, and he's like, I don't think you fully
this is
understand.
A different kind.
Yeah. And then though, I think what is my personal favorite scene is right after that, is when she is so dissatisfied. She goes to what I guess is we're supposed to interpret as her job, but there's not a lot much else said about it. But she goes to a club, and she starts singing this very romantic sort of like piano ballad songs. And this is the part where I was the most impressed by the filmmaking, I think, because I feel like Jorg, despite having a lot of, he does have some interesting shot choices. There are moments where I feel like this could go into the next realm of something more psychological, something a little bit more intimate via a form of surrealism, almost like some of the ways that the filmmakers that he likes, like someone like Fulci, he cites a lot as someone who is a huge inspiration, which is understandable based on the gore factor alone, and also how you talked about gore as its own form of artistry, because when we did our Fulci episode, we talked about how Fulci was a painter, and that he actually brought his painting background into his gore, and he saw it as another form of, you know, sort of like creating textures and creating colors and something beautiful, even though it is disgusting to look at.
I would die for
so and the closest I think that this got to me was the scene where she's singing, because she's singing in this beautiful like dress next to a beautiful piano in like this nice club, and then it's interspliced and superimposed with images of the rotting corpses, like of skulls and of body parts, and you can tell that this is like the most where the romantic angle and romantic style of the film is directly confronted by what her fantasies are, what she is romantic about. And it was the first time I felt like in this film I really felt, where I was like, just how sort of sweet she was and how important it was to her, and how almost I wouldn't say that she would prefer her, you know, to maybe have normal desires, but she definitely is someone who is sort of being forced to not be able to express them. So here she is expressing them in a way that is acceptable, singing a romantic song in a dress next to a piano.
Yeah.
But really her brain and her thoughts and her feelings are on these just absolutely disgusting textures. And I felt like that was the most sort of like cinematically interesting way that Jorg connects those ideas together. And I was actually sort of moved by that scene.
That scene is wonderful. I'm so glad you brought that up. Because that scene, to me, sort of speaks to how people allow desires from more marginalized people to sort of express themselves in more, I guess, anonymous art, or more fetishized or objectified art, or tokenized, I should say. And then also on the flip side, how, say, queer people, for example, will like repurpose or reclaim various artists, or say like pop singers, or campy, ridiculous garbage sleaze about a necrophile from Germany as something that speaks to their desires in a way that is not allowed to be explicated. There was some ridiculous tweet that went around months ago, which feels like years ago, before even the pandemic started, where I was talking about how it's like, we don't need any more use for queer subtext. I just want to see two girls kiss. And I was just like, to me, queer subtext is so much a part of the experience of being queer, so much a part of the history of being queer. Because to me, when you are seeing, like, I don't know, when I watch something like Venom, yeah, I'm going to bring up Venom, and you see Tom Hardy feel like a loser in a man's body and then morph into this like gigantic, horny, angry piece of shit beast who is also a loser. That to me speaks to queerness and speaks to my experience before transitioning and sort of hating my body and hating my transness more than, say, I mean, bad example, but like Lucas Dont's Girl, right? That very ill-conceived Cannes film. And Nekromantik sort of gets at the heart of like why it's not just that we reclaim things, it's not just that we take these romantic love ballads and make them about dead bodies. We need that sort of level of removal. We need that level of secrecy. We need to keep things coded, or at least maybe not need, but we want to keep things coded because that speaks to how we had to exist. That speaks to how we like intuitively responded to the world. I don't know. I think it's pretty cool that that comes through here in a context that is applicable to queerness without being an explicitly queer work.
Right, like there are universal feelings that are expressed through Monica in this way, even whether because I don't know, is York queer?
I don't know. I don't think so. But I sure have claimed this. This is.
Oh yeah. Well, no, and I could see it too, just because like Monica's sort of like the way that we were made to feel for her in this film is sort of, I guess, a context where someone like Jorg might be able to understand the experiences of others, even if it is a very graphic context for it. And I don't know how I haven't explored Jorg enough. I do need to check out more of his films, especially people keep recommending The Death King.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
To me as like the next one to check out, but I definitely want to become a little bit more familiar, because I feel like I would because I do like both of these films, but I feel like I would like them more if I just kind of knew a little bit more about some of the things that he's trying to get at, especially with regard to the German history angle of it too, because there are elements in this about like the reunification after the fall of the Berlin Wall and sort of like Germany being split, and there's a little bit of class elements to it. There's a little bit of gender elements to it, and I would just be very curious to have a better understanding of the history and even some of the cinematic history that he's engaged with, because I saw people even like reclaimed him as like a bit of a follow-up to people like Sieberberg and Fassbinder and other like well-known sort of canonized German,
he's extremely in conversation with someone like Fassbinder, which I mean, sorry, did you have something else to say? Go off. Okay.
No, keep going.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think so. Going off my last point, you know how I waxed poetic about how this is a movie that speaks a lot to my queerness. I don't think that's intentional at all. I think all of that is sort of positioned actually in the context of the reunification of Germany. So between 1987, when the first Nekromantik came out, and 1991, what big thing happened in the exact location that these films took place? The fall of the Berlin Wall. So you have this film that's taking place in Berlin, right after the reunification of Germany. And you have Monica is living in East Berlin, which is sort of the part of Berlin that was struggling financially a little bit more. And then you have Mark and all of the socially acceptable stuff existing in West Berlin. And you're getting Germany at that time was sort of, it was not confronting its history, which, you know, is still marked in all of its physicality, in the body, in the rotting corpse of East Berlin, in the rotting corpse of Germany, right? You still have the remnants of World War II. You still have the remnants of occupation. And it is all crumbling. It is all like, and they're trying to build it up. They're trying to cover it up. They're trying to not acknowledge what's going on, what had happened. They're trying to bury it. No pun intended.
Yeah, this is a huge subject of sort of like German genre cinema, just in general, because we actually talked about it. I don't know if you saw it last year, but we had it on our honorable mentions for our genre movies of 2019. Fatih Akın's The Golden Glove.
I did not see The Golden Glove.
Which was he's a Turkish filmmaker who made a 1970s German serial killer film, sort of in the vein of like Angst, or I guess it would also be like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer kind of deal.
Just kind of with the killer the entire time, going through all of the kills in extreme detail, and how he covers all the bodies, and how he's like kind of surrounded by, like economic decay and just people kind of getting sick and dying themselves because of their poor living circumstances. It's very
and it also shows how he would be how he would be targeting people like prostitutes because of their being part of his low income community and like hanging out around the bars that he hangs out. And he's a bit of a weirdo in that way. But also the thing that stood out the most was something sort of similar in the visual thematics of the film, was that he literally stuffs the corpses in the walls of his apartment.
Yeah,
and they literally start to rot and smell and like come through the walls, and like there is definitely a sense of like wrestling with sort of like a nation's corpses that are still in the closet and that they haven't properly dealt with, and then all of a sudden, you know, eventually someone calls the cops on the smell in his house, and that's how they eventually discover all of these different corpses that are there. So watching that, I was reminded of this as well. So very clearly that he was pulling that, I think, a little bit from Jorg as well. This is just something Germans are thinking about when it comes to making violent films, is their own history of violence and lack of sort of dealing with it.
Yeah, and I think sort of the tenderness towards Monica in the film, she's not being blamed for her, perverse obsessions, right? She's not. This is something that she is saddled with. This is something that, as a community, that acknowledges it. And
yeah, she's really, the whole film is really just her doing her best to like sort of satisfy these desires without like, you know, taking them to, you know, a certain extreme. Like she's actually trying to kind of, as you pointed out, to compromise with sort of Mark, who is more of the I guess the accepted society. So she's trying to compromise with it, but it doesn't. It won't compromise back with her. Mark won't sit back and enjoy taking the photos. He won't enjoy watching the films. He won't sort of like make a clear effort for it, which is eventually what leads to her while having sex with him chopping his head off and replacing it with Rob's head in very vivid, gruesome detail. And the most gross one, I think, is, well, and maybe not gross, but like kind of inventive. It's the one where she ties the little tiny rope around his penis so that the blood flow won't leave it, as his head is just shooting blood, or his neck is just shooting blood everywhere, so that it will so that his penis will stay erect and have blood flow going through it. She ties a little rope around it, and then she puts Rob's head there, and she has the best sex of her entire life, looking at Rob's head
and the way that,
on Mark's body.
The way that I read it, too, was like what we were saying, like the compromises. It did feel like she was very much trying to do what maybe she felt was, or what she felt society thought was the norm and all that. And of course, I mean, it is, but you know, it felt like she was trying to, in this particular context. Right. It felt like she was trying to kind of fight off those urges that she knew she had, and then at a certain point, she just couldn't anymore. It didn't feel like as premeditated as it might appear to me anyway. It felt like she got to a point where her natural feelings just you know, took over, and she was like, this is it. I'm not going to be satisfied unless it's with the dead body that I'm in love with. You know?
It's this incredible like convergence of her desires, of the film's acceptance of her, and also of, you know, you're literally reunifying two things, one of the things that is rotting and the other thing that is undesirable but technically alive, and sort of mashing them both together, and that is sort of served as a climactic and fulfilling experience, a la, say, tearing down the wall. And I think, I don't know, that's some gnarly semiotics right there. That's some, and it is really like fucking wild metaphors.
Yeah, and it is interesting that he does, like, she does have to use his real body to get the actual physical pleasure of it, which is why, you know, like, she zip ties his penis or whatever, and then replaces his head with the dead head. But I felt like that was interesting too. Like, you know, I guess she couldn't feel like it feels like there's a cross there, like a fusion where she still needed that real body there, but the idea of the dead body was what she was truly in love with and what she truly had feelings for. You know?
Yeah, well, it was bringing it into for very brief moment, like bringing the dead body alive almost.
Right, exactly.
Getting kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Which it is revealed in the last scene also winds up in her getting pregnant, which I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be a thing that she was trying to do, or if it was a thing that he was developing for perhaps a Nekromantik 3.
Yeah, I read it as kind of like she seems a little happy about it when the shot goes back to her, and it felt to me like a surprised smile a little bit. I'm not 100% sure.
There is a comic,
but it felt like a joke too, like the way like Jorg was kind of like you know, I don't know, it felt a little bit ironic in a way.
Yeah, there is a comic called Son of Nekromantik that Jorg was involved with. I think it came out in like 2015, 2016.
Oh, okay.
That continues that story. I don't know if that was intentional or not, or just sort of I guess we could continue the story here. I haven't read it, so I couldn't speak on it, but I do know that I believe that this pregnancy is then the titular son of Nekromantik.
Part of the Nekromantik.
Yeah,
universe.
You know. This is sort of phase one. This is phase one.
All right. Well,
can't wait for the assemble movie.
Yeah. Pivoting to the reductive rating round on this one, which for you, Sam, is where we remove all the words, all the nuance, and land on a number between 1 and 5 for the film. But it's also kind of turned into closing statements or any last scenes that or quotes or anything we didn't get a chance to bring up that you really like. It's also a place to do that. And for me, I feel a little bad about it, but this one's going to get the high 3 from me. I do want to revisit both of these. I think just the initial shock might have overpowered my viewing experience on the first watch here.
Yeah.
But after talking about it, like I feel like there's more happening than my initial feelings felt. And also it would also just be nice for me to be a little bit more familiar with some of, again, the German history and the history of German cinema that he's more in conversation with, to get into some of the more sort of art qualities that he's going for, because I spent a lot of the film thinking that it does work very well as sort of like a blunt force shock with the obviously the gore factor, with clear gestures towards like the actual feelings of Monica's character. But I did leave it kind of wishing there was a little bit more of the filmmaking level that he kind of revealed with himself and the style of the scene where she's singing. But also it might be very intentional that he doesn't want to go into that sort of more dreamier headspace at a certain point. He wanted to keep it in the realm of the body. Might be something he's interested in. But by the way, my initial feeling was that there's something interesting happening here. I don't know exactly what it is. I definitely felt something. And after talking about it, I definitely want to go down some more Jorg. And honestly, I haven't seen as much Fassbinder as I should. I've only seen like 2 or 3 Fassbinder films, so I really need to go down that rabbit hole as well, and I'm hoping to return to these ones and maybe even get more out of them, because I will say, first time around for the next film we talked about, I was able to get a lot out of that, which had sort of a bit of a similar idea. I would say kind of sort of like pleasure being destructive, or destruction in the pursuit of it in a certain way. There's an element to that to that here that I think Splatter and Naked Blood just really took to the next level for me as well. But yeah, for you, Jamie.
I'm right there with you. I'm gonna give it the high 3 as well. It's one that I feel will grow on me in this conversation once again. Like, this happens a lot with these kind of very strange brain melters that we get on the show. Is after the initial conversation, I feel like I just have a much larger understanding of what's going on, because I mean, I was just kind of sitting there, you know, just flabbergasted a lot of the time at what I was witnessing, and that I always love. So I mean, I can always get something out of that. But yeah, this conversation helped open it up for me a little bit more. And one thing I wanted to say, just because we were talking about the food connection, there's this shot that just got me so bad. Was when she's preparing the dead penis and wrapping it up in the plate and everything, and about to put it in the fridge. And I think she's
like a piece of leftover ham or something.
Yeah, and she's holding it, and then it does like a hard cut to her cooking and eating meat. And I was like, no, that didn't just happen, did it? And it's not that, but just the way that he, connects those two shots to make you think like, yep, this could also be happening in my movie, and she might be going this far as well. It's just, he has a lot of that where it's very, very smart filmmaking, and it just shocks you, and in the best possible ways.
Major possibly in Michigan energy.
Pardon
it's
me?
Major possibly in Michigan energy. Cecilia Condit's short film. Yeah. Which is
so I'll give it a high 3 for now, but yeah, these could definitely grow on me for sure.
For you, Sam, can we assume the 5?
Okay, so actually, this one's a 4. This one's a 4.
Nice.
I think it's a little long.
That's a critique I would say.
Yeah,
as well.
I think it's a little long. It could be a 5. It changes. I've seen this film several times. As one does when they are a spiraling high schooler with no direction and a lot of unpronounced feelings. You watch it a lot and just turn it on at like 11 p.m. on a Wednesday when you have to get up at 6 in the next morning because you can't sleep. I think it's great. I also had an affection. We didn't talk about the fact that it was like confiscated by the German government in Munich 12 days after it came out.
I remember reading that.
That's very badass.
Yeah, which I think is so cool. And I did spend so much time as a teenager like hunting down different films that were seized because I wanted to feel like a real edgelord son of a bitch. But yeah, I think it's a little long. I love it to pieces. No pun intended. Again, I'm stumbling into those constantly this episode, but
hard not to.
Yeah. But yeah, I adore this film. It holds a very special place in my heart as a movie about what it's like to feel desire.
Well, we're going to have a little bit more talk about that same thing a little bit when we jump into Splatter Naked Blood, which we're going to do coming up next year. All right, we are back, and we are talking Splatter Naked Blood, the 1996 Japanese horror film directed by Hisayasu Sato. It is apparently a remake of a 1987 film by him called, this is the title, Genuine Rape.
Oh my god.
Jesus. I did not know that.
That's just the most like blunt title I think we've ever heard on the show, for sure.
Yeah, like the word genuine is doing a lot of power there. I don't really know. Yeah. But I haven't explored a lot of Sato, but after this, I absolutely will be if I can find his films, because it seems like he was one of the most prolific Japanese filmmakers from around 1986, 87-ish, roughly, all the way until 1997, 1998. It seems like he made what amounts to I guess like 24 films. all in what is known as the sort of pinku genre, which is sort of Japanese exploitation films involving a lot of nudity. And he would later develop that obviously into more sort of splatter eros genre of film, which is
okay. So he didn't always do like super gore. It was just mostly nudity and sex that he was kind of going with. Or did he always mix the two?
Well, it seemed like he has a lot of film that mixes the two, but he definitely got started making pinku films and bondage films, and he seemed like he was a bit of a for-hire director for films that were already getting made before he was able to weaponize that into making things that he wanted to make, clearly.
Right.
Which he very clearly did with this one here, doing his own sort of like erotic, surreal splatter film about the very idea of pleasure and sadness, and I was like kind of like immediately taken by this film because it's incredibly lean and to the point. It's like something like 75 minutes, and it's 75 minutes straight of developing its idea on creating the ultimate painkiller, which obviously in a way that he has to depict in the most vicious way possible has negative side effects in that people it kills their pain so badly that they start to enjoy pain. And
too much.
He takes that to some certain extremes that we'll say.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I was the most taken with was just that, in a similar way to Nekromantik 2, but I think taken even a little bit further, Sato just has such a sort of dreamy, light, almost like kind of like soothing, ethereal quality to the filmmaking, while again depicting something that is just absolutely repulsive. And we'll get to the most famous scene and scenes that take place in this movie, which is very. It is known as one of the most appalling scenes in all of Japanese horror. So we're going to be talking about that, just in case you're wondering why this one connects to Nekromantik 2. But I will say for long portions of this film, it's just kind of like this really sad film about a son who's lost his father and his mother, who has obviously lost her husband, and both of them feeling sad, which has kind of like driven him sort of implicitly to develop this painkiller to, he wants to significantly improve the happiness of mankind, is how he says it. He wants to spend their days in feelings of blue skies and spring. He even calls the drug mycin, or my son, because of his dad, who was a scientist, sort of exploring the ideas of, I think it suggested something, he was trying to find eternal life. He was trying to find the light. Anyway, there's all these implications of sort of like achieving transcendence or beauty or lightness through science and through progress, I guess. But then it is connected to this ultimate painkiller that he sort of inflicts on three women who are who have agreed to participate in a study for contraceptives. So as they're getting their experimental birth control put into their bodies, they're also getting put this experimental pain medication at the same time, and it kind of switches between the son's feelings about the sort of family drama, and then it switches to him experimenting with these women's bodies, and holding and like filming them on like this sort of like digital video camcorder, which the film sort of like takes on the aesthetic of a little bit while he's doing that, and then striking up eventually a relationship with one of the girls that he is using as a guinea pig for his pain medication.
And then there's also a psychic cactus.
Yeah, and then we got to get to the psychic cactus, which is just
who could forget about
fucking
that?
Insane, and is like, I think the part that eventually took it to the next level for me a little bit, because these girls, when they all sit down after they get the medication put into them, they all sit down and they talk about the things that sort of like appeal to them. And one woman says that since she's hit puberty or something, or adulthood, that she no longer sleeps. So she has to deal with a way of no longer sleeping, which is by having these dreamy VR sessions with a sentient cactus. That's what she does instead of sleeping for 8 hours or whatever. But the other girl is sort of obsessed with her body. She's I guess she's sort of a bit of a stand-in for vanity, I guess is supposed to be the idea symbolically, because the other girl is also, she loves food, and she thinks that food is
gluttony,
very pleasurable, and a little bit of gluttony, I guess, in there. I do really love the line that she gets where she's like, "Man was born to eat and die."
Yeah, damn right.
There's so much like vaguely Freudian Oedipal nonsense in this movie that is all like very clearly fitting into this kind of fable, but then there are moments where it sort of branches off from that in this really beautiful way, where it sort of abandons all pretense of metaphor and just exists in this either extremely visceral or extremely ethereal realm. And that's what makes it special to me in terms of its form.
Yeah. One thing in particular was the way that, like, he sets this up as a very, I don't know, in my opinion, it's like it's dramatic, it's spiritual in a way, metaphysical, and then as things start to get more and more real life violent, like they start to hurt themselves and all that, he just cranks up the aggression. Like with the sound design, for instance, there's so much like sounds of slime and just fingers going into blood and guts and it feels like he cranks that gain up to like 10 too. He doesn't. It doesn't feel like the sound design is leveled compared to the rest of the scene. It's very, very loud and in your face, and I found that interesting, just that he starts off with this very there's the family drama and the kids obviously going through some psychological stuff, but then once the violence hits, it's just there's no metaphor about it. It's right there. It's real. It's physical. It's in your face. And yeah, it's very effective.
And the Foley work. I mean, it's like
unreal.
It is so imaginative and so like. That is the bread and butter to me of like gore films, is the splatter work, the like gooey visual effects, practical effects, and the sound design. And I mean, there's a lot more to this film, and there's a lot more that makes it special in my eyes.
Absolutely.
But I mean, on the pure, if you just want to watch some really good gnarly gore, this is like there are two scenes in this that are probably the most viscerally upsetting I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing that I think really ends up working about this film, because it really lands home, especially to do with the cactus stuff. When they talk about, I dream with the cactus will show you the scenery of your heart. But
the cactus also have the virtual reality headset on too.
Yep.
Just that image of like a cactus with all these wires, and it's
like positioned so where strange. His face would be. Like it's not just anywhere. It's like up on the top for some reason. It makes no sense.
Yeah, but it does just get at this idea, I think, in the filmmaking especially, that there are kind of like, we exist on two planes. Like we exist in kind of like this more psychological, metaphysical, spiritual sort of plane of existence, where you have a psychedelic dream of romance with a cactus. Or you feel these really horrible feelings about sort of the loss of his father, which is a physical thing that we see happen in the film, is something just so inexplicable and unknowable that has a kind of psychic effect on him, and then we see that later expressed in actual bodily form. and he eventually gets to, you exist in these two different places, and you're trying to kind of get to the next stage of your life. You're trying to get into this realm of maybe we can be happy, maybe we can, you know. So it seems like that's kind of like the pursuit that people are in, but like it's almost like the body is kind of holding them back, and that's why he wants to develop this painkiller, and that's why eventually people sort of do damage to their bodies in this film. It feels like people trying to escape the body a little bit and get to a sort of like transcendent realm. And I think that's what's so powerful, is that the filmmaking is kind of light and ethereal and dreamy in certain ways that get you into that headspace. And then when he pivots to the body horror, it is so visceral and it's so disgusting, and you're just so invested in watching these people tear their own bodies apart. Like when the one girl pierces herself like 6 million times and is like ripping her arm flesh off, or when the one girl who loves food literally starts eating herself. When she put her hand in the fucking
oh god, yeah,
the tempura gag is fucking unreal.
Yes.
Goddamn.
Yeah, she like boils and fries her hand, and then she starts eating her own hand, and then at a certain point she's taking a knife and fork to her own genitals and eating those, and then she sticks a fork into her fucking eyeball and pulls out her
when she
eyeball.
chews
like
on her
one shot too.
Yeah, she like chews
so
on her own clit, and then totally like and like pulls out the eye. And usually when they pull out the eye in these films, it's like it pops out, but this has like this like conical like extension to it. Like she's pulling out the eye and all the nerves.
She cuts it off.
Yeah,
too.
it is like
God.
And then it like twitches in the air, and it is.
And then she eats it root first. That was, to me, like the grossest part for some reason. I was like, eat the eyeball, not the root first. Oh, no.
Yeah, the part that was the grossest to me is when she first penetrates it and she pierces it and pops it. Like,
it's so good, too.
Like how you would pop like an egg yolk or something.
Yeah.
Like that's what it looks like when she does it. It's so gross. And worth noting, shout out to the makeup artist on this film, Yuichi Matsui, whose makeup credits include Ichi the Killer and Kill Bill.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
There's all the blood. That's the explanation.
Yeah. This film has the best gore. I mean, like it operates on, two levels where it's like you're seeing something that means a lot and is very emotionally affecting. And we can talk about that because this film sort of operates where it has about 6 different layers going all at once, and they all sort of follow the same trajectory, but it'll never, like, there's stuff with the mother and the son and the father that is all sort of leading to the final, like, VR 3-way with a cactus. Then there's stuff with plants and sort of how we observe things, and then there's the bodily horror stuff, and it's all sort of leading to the same place, which I think is really neat because I love when when stories tie together all these disconnected strands really well. But also the gore is, I mean, just
it is exceptional for sure.
Yeah, like just the progress of the girl that the one that's obsessed with her physical appearance, how she's like these cuts that she gives herself, and then that there's a close up of the, I don't know what it is. It's like some type of I don't know if it's like a makeup thing that she's using or something, but she puts it right through her wrist. And once again, he just
it looks like a piercing
needle
needle or like a knitting needle or something.
Yeah.
It looks like what she's using.
Yeah, and it's just it's some of the most visceral violence I think I've seen on the show, because he doesn't just show you something shocking and then turn away from it. There are like long 10-second shots of her putting the needle into her wrist and then like twisting it around and stretching the skin, and it's just like,
and the sound once again.
Oh yeah,
too,
and I mean,
like,
he has to throw that in your face because I think
so
sound design
wet and
is
gross and
that sound design I think is really what sets people off more than the image usually does. Even though we think of the image, I really do think that sound is what makes you cringe most of the time. And I mean, he knocks it out of the park. It's unbelievable sound design.
I definitely found myself even more than with Nekromantik, like actually looking away from the screen a little bit.
Yeah,
like
me
I
too.
eventually went back and watched them, but like my immediate reaction, even just hearing it, was just like, I don't want to see this. I just want to. And like even as someone who watches these kinds of movies, it's just that was the general reaction I had watching it, because it's just so absolutely.
And
disgusting.
There's something very disturbing about the fact that the characters are so intrigued by it. Like it's like especially
and enjoying it.
Right,
yeah,
the
that's
food
definitely
girl,
a huge
especially
part.
like she's smiling, just and laughing and having a great time as she's eating her vagina and cutting off her nipple and all this crazy shit.
Oh my god, I forgot about
the
the
nipple
Yeah,
too.
and that is detailed. I don't even know how that looks so real. I could even like I could not process that one. That one was
she
really hard.
takes a knife and fork to her own nipple and just like as if she was cutting like a nice piece of cheesecake.
Yeah, as if you're
something.
like
she's just
scooping
like,
the top off creme brulee.
God.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is like the trigger warning. I don't. First of all, this movie's on YouTube. I don't know how. I have no idea
for real.
how they allow that to be on there. But I think there is something to be said for. I mean, obviously, this is a gross out movie, and part of the sort of perverse pleasure, is supposed to, you watch these painful experiences and you do derive sort of a pleasure from watching them if you are a certain type of freak, which I am. Not like,
Hello.
Yeah, like
many people.
Yeah, I
who listen to
figure.
this, I'm sure, will be
in a podcast called
We have the audience
Sleazoid.
for it.
Yeah. But I do think the film has such an awareness, especially with the woman who is cutting herself. It starts off and it sort of feels like, oh, this is gluttony and vanity and sort of sociopathy are the three that are at play. But it becomes more like this is a person who is consuming and who views her body as something to consume. Then there is the person who views her body as something to be witnessed. And then there's the person who views her body as a vessel for witnessing. And all of those sort of get distorted because one person eats her own body and then this woman sort of destroys it. And then, the other woman who is witnessing all of this begins to derive pleasure from destroying everything that she's witnessing. She, like that pain of cutting someone up, and then the desire to sleep, the desire to rest sort of becomes corrupted, and she's making all of these other people rest permanently.
And I would say too, there's also something to be said about sort of like the transformative quality of what she's witnessing a little bit too, that she sees that in a lot of ways that some of these people were previously kind of unhappy in certain regards.
The camera's photosynthesis.
And then these people are, so they're feeling like this very intense pleasure from this experience. So then it's almost like she sees a way of kind of like relieving people or making them feel better through bodily harm when she eventually becomes a killer and ends up killing the main kid's mom. And it's used as a bit of a reveal, even though we kind of know by the time that she does it in the film. But I was kind of surprised to see that during the sort of like climactic moment of this film, where it is revealed in the scene where the sort of more sociopathic girl, the girl who has taken on more homicidal tendencies with regard to the drug, and the boy who invented the medication, they are having a psychedelic virtual reality threesome with the cactus.
Oh yeah,
Fuck yeah.
And it's this very sort of like pleasurable moment in the filmmaking as well, where he really takes it to the next level, doing like these sort of like dolly pan shots around the sex while also on a green screen, while also throwing in just all the visual insanity that he can. And then but during this psychic connection that they have is when he experiences from her point of view her killing the two girls eventually, and then also killing his mom. And there's something so strange that having this such euphoric moment between these two, and then in her mind, this euphoria also extends to sort of like relieving these people or inflicting them with how she sees it pleasure, and then having the same fucking climactic moment as Nekromantik 2, where she totally just fucking slits his throat in the middle of sex, and
Bathes
the way
in the blood.
and he wants it, and he wants her to.
Yes,
and I think
because he takes the serum before, right?
Yeah.
So the all of that pain becomes complete pleasure to him, and so in a way, it's very, you know,
I think
kind of her.
I think
she helped him achieve the transcendent eternal life he was after since his father.
Exactly.
Which is also something too that the gore at that point takes on less of a realistic quality, and it does that sort of insane thing where it like cartoonishly sprays bright red everywhere in the middle of this psychedelic euphoric moment.
Yeah, because even in the scene where there's the woman cutting herself, there's not a lot of blood. I mean, there's blood in spots, right? She's drenched in it, but it's not spraying everywhere. It doesn't have a vector that the blood there does. And I think what's really neat about the structure of the film is it shifts from it becomes basically starting at the tempura and ending with her slicing the scientist's throat, the scientist's son's throat. You become progressively more it becomes progressively more psychological pain that they are turning into pleasure, and that becomes the same for the audience. So you are viscerally connected to something in the gore that is also not really present for you internally, and as it becomes things that are less viscerally present, it becomes more of something of a burden that the audience carries too, and the audience is a feeling. Like we are, not to be incredibly corny, but it's like we are also taking the serum. I think I just want to touch on, probably a little early, my favorite moment in the film, which is when she's, it's the woman who's cutting herself. And I think Sato has such an eye for self-harm. I mean, like, sorry, major trigger warning here for talking about that. But, I mean, of course, I hope you, at this point, if you have been triggered, I hope you're, I hope you're taking care of yourself.
I hope you've turned it off by now or not watched these.
Just don't watch these for sure.
Yeah, please don't. Please don't.
You'll have a time.
There is a sense for how in situations of self-harm it becomes sort of a fascination, it becomes sort of a removal, it does become a release. And to see something that is so common and is so real, like, you don't see a lot of people eating themselves, right? But you do see people hurting themselves, right? And to be something that is, relatively close to home for me, represented so viscerally was shocking and very upsetting, but to also recognize the tenderness of that pain, like it never, it seeks to validate the release and the pain all at once. And it of course never suggests it as a permanent solution for living, but it does very creepily signify that struggle with sort of a desire to mutilate your appearance. And then, homicidal lady walks in, and the vain woman is crying, and she's like, I can't stop, it feels so good. And then they hug, and then there is a slight breeze as they hug, and everything goes quiet. And it's this one moment where everything stops, and it becomes totally present in the world. And to put that into your weird, vaguely pornographic, because it doesn't really escape the visual language of pornography, super gore film, is it stunned me the first time I saw it. I was blown away that it would take this moment to allow you to feel anything and sort of skyrocket you into this other emotional plane.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I think that's the thing that impressed me the most about this film is just that, you know, despite the sort of vulgar aspects and shocking aspects of it, that it is just so sensitively drawn with the psychological experiences of most of the major characters, including the mother, who gets like these beautiful moments where like she's watching this old footage of the father, and we even get a visualization of the scene where he disappears, where it's just he says that he's going to be back, that he thinks he saw some light in the water, so he starts walking towards the water and just basically disappears and is out of her life while she's pregnant with their son.
I also find it interesting that he chose to actually show him like fade away, as opposed to, you know, like she looks away, she looks back, and he's gone, that kind of thing. That the physical like image of him actually dissolving, I don't know. It gave me more of a. It's like as if it wasn't as spiritual or anything like that. It's almost as if it actually happened. I just found it very interesting that he chose to show you the disappearance instead of just making it ominous.
I am a sucker for ghosts.
Or not.
I am a sucker for ghosts in movies. I will immediately love any movie more where all of a sudden a dead character pops up in just the corner of a room. Which I mean does happen later on.
Not only does he pop up in a corner, but he finds a new home. You know,
he climbs into his wife's corpse.
Yeah,
which is just crazy, and one of the craziest effects.
Yeah, like that is where you have completely abandoned realism. She puffs up like the Marshmallow Man, right?
Yeah,
and he just like envelops her. Oh.
That shot of my favorite shot is when he goes inside and you see like the feet dangling from her stomach, and then it goes
the feet sticking out of the open chest cavity,
and then the open chest or the open stomach, and then you see his hands come up and close the stomach
like a Venus flytrap. Like, it's like
it was one of the most bizarre images I've ever seen, and it's so well done too. Like I'm assuming it's just like a half faked body with a bed sheet or something like that, but it's very, very well done. And to watch a fully grown man climb inside a woman's stomach was just. I mean, it is what it is. That explanation is bizarre in its own.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what ultimately made me like this film so much, is that it abandons that realism after a certain point.
Yeah.
That it kind of merges the bodily experience with this psychic experience that these characters are having, to the point where they're feeling both in both planes, that they are in this dreamy psychedelic cactus universe while at the same time also, you know, connecting it to their real physical bodies and the experiences of what they're feeling. And like watching like a wife reconnected with her husband, in the film, it's a beautiful moment where she's reconnected with her husband. She's seeing him again.
Yeah.
But the reconnection is so fucking visually drawn in just this kind of like repulsive way.
And what's weird too is that she disappears after, I believe. So it's almost as if they both transcended. So it does seem kind of happy. But after, it's just you have to watch something that's so violent and strange to get there. So it's a very you feel a mixed mixed feelings.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of mutilation or destruction to achieve the kind of metaphysical, which is something that I feel like the film making itself and its tangible and more dreamier qualities actually do express.
And it expresses it through the entire film. Like you
yes, like front to back.
You go into this movie and the posters are full of gore and everything about it. I mean, the title is Splatter Naked Blood, and it starts off and it's just a boy biking through the city, and it's this like upbeat sort of it's a scene that wouldn't be out of place in a like slice of life anime or a Persona cutscene, right? Like
there's all these shots of the city and the skyscrapers and stuff. It is very much like that, for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's so much about. Yeah, I love the plants. I love the plants in this movie. I love that it becomes because plants don't bleed. Plants, and to take this movie that sort of sells itself to you as a gnarly, incredibly graphic, upsetting film about all that stuff. One second. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
No problem.
I keep having to like wander around because nobody told me that the lawnmower people were coming today, of course. Right?
That's all good.
Happens with my apartment all the time.
And to sort of be about people becoming plants, sort of excising all of their blood, excising all of their bodily fluids, draining themselves. I think it's not unimportant that the original drug trial is for a contraceptive to curb overpopulation, right?
Yeah.
And then slowly everyone becomes sort of either consumed by sex and at the same time removed from sex, which I think is a very interesting concept for a filmmaker who is fascinated by, or who is commonly known at least for all about the perversions of our deepest sexual desires. You sort of focus on people trying to abandon those desires altogether.
Interesting. Yeah. See, I haven't explored more of him yet, but I really want to watch Muscle, which you said
Muscle's amazing. Muscle takes very similar approaches to how we view bodies. Bodies in space, but not in space. They use that like cliched form that I do love. Like I will watch any movie about bodies in space. Yeah, but it focuses on the male body and bodybuilders and vulnerability in that regard. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that I've seen that other than Splatter, everyone seems to really like. Like it seems like one of the more sort of like acclaimed films in his filmography.
Is it like the dark version of Pumping Iron with Arnie?
Kind of, honestly, yeah. Not far off.
Dope. That sounds great.
Or like the horny fucked up cousin of Carell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, Fassbender coming up in both sides of this. Yeah.
There we go.
I think.
Well.
Go ahead. Yeah. I just wanted to mention, as you mentioned, all the different types of filmmaking going on, creating, different textural spaces in the film, which is pretty impressive. Mm-hmm.
Well, pivoting towards the reductive rating on this one, I think this one honestly got the high for me. I had a great time with Sato's sort of vision of sort of the splatter erotica genre in this very sort of like dreamy, light, sort of like ethereal cinematic vision of sort of like these psychological experiences, these feelings of overwhelming sadness, and an interesting idea is formed about sort of denying pain, but also at the same time like trying to transform it into something else and something grounded in sort of like the physical and the bodily. And I do think that something is lent to it too by creating these sort of psychological experiences like we've talked about with the sex scene, and when the son eventually hits his vision of eternal life, when he lets her sort of euphorically slice his throat during sex and spraying blood everywhere. It's this giant release. It's this amazing feeling. But the film itself is grounded in this very sort of like video camcorder kind of vibe, which is a little bit uneasy sometimes. It's a little bit detached, especially in the footage of him like recording them. And there's a little bit of a voyeur angle to it on that side of it. But it's so important to go from something grounded and physical like that, and then to sort of depict this almost out of body escape, this transcendence, this vision of as the father says, something about the fusion of nuclear and light or something like that, and which is apparently how he somehow got to the next plane, although he didn't really need to dream together with the VR cactus in order to do it. But best supporting actor, VR cactus.
Oh yeah, hell of a performance.
I did like that she brings up too, as Sam was mentioning earlier, about the plants when the girl who does have the VR cactus dreams mentions that the reason she does it with a cactus is because the cactus also never really sleeps. It's always kind of like moving on the inside. It doesn't really she's like, maybe it never sleeps, and maybe it is always dreaming too, is kind of like the idea of having it there. But again, just seeing this very sensitive psychological depiction of pain and trying to both exercise it and also transform it, and then seeing it in just this very visceral vision of mutilation and pleasure simultaneously in the filmmaking. I found it just very powerfully expressed, especially in the way that the characters and how they feel about it. There's all kinds of little moments and psychological engagements, both with the mom, with each different girl, and how they feel about their experiences and how they're letting go. And then obviously, especially the son's experience and the sort of homicidal girl's way of basically helping them all reach that plane, and especially the mom being reunited with the father in just the most horrific way that you could possibly like that scene is basically filmed like you would have like a typical Hollywood embrace.
Yeah,
like that is the emotion being expressed in that scene, is that, you know, like the mom gets to heaven and hugs the father. That is the sort of like emotional psychological expression of that scene.
I thought it was going to be like this, you know, like she's got her open stomach and she's dying. You know, I thought it was like she's on her way to the next realm or the next wave or whatever, and she's seeing her husband, and there's going to be this moment of catharsis for her, and it's going to be great. They're reuniting, even though she's dying a very, you know, painful and really grotesque death. But then what does he do? He dives right in.
This movie refuses to
can't
not
even have
This movie refuses.
Yeah, it just can't even have a normal embrace on your way to the next plane of living. but it's great. It's great.
Yeah, so and the way that, again, he just formulates all of this in this very like tangible, disgusting, like video dreamscape quality. I think it was just it really worked for me, and I was really impressed, and I can't wait to check out more of his stuff. So
yeah, I'm right there with you on the 4 out of 5. I want to dive into this guy's filmography for sure. I guess I'm going to be checking out, what is it, Muscle? Is that what it was called?
Muscle.
That'll be the next one. So watch Pumping Iron, the disgusting, crazy, bizarre horror version. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I thought this was great. Once again, the sound design for the kills are just unbelievably disgusting, and make it so that you can't really take any, you know, that animalistic pleasure that you get out of watching a slasher every once in a while. It just does not feel at all like a traditional horror movie in that regard. You do feel for these people, even though, and you feel cross because, you know, they're doing this to try to discover pleasure that's beyond what they've experienced before. And you can tell that a lot of these people are going through just, whether it be small or large, they're going through a lot of turmoil. And so to see them be able to access pleasure, but through this grotesque pain, you feel a mixed amount of things.
That definitely is what took it to the next level. Like watching her eat herself,
and enjoy it
is one thing, but the ecstatic pleasure in not just the filmmaking, but the performance too, and everything about it. Just
because
it makes it so much more impactful for some reason.
And I think too, like the differences between the more vanity girl and then the one that eats herself is the one that eats herself is like she feels pure pleasure, whereas the one with that's going through more of the vanity, she feels the pleasure, but she's also very frightened because she's destroying her.
She's more conflicted for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas you're watching the girl eat herself, and she is it's finger licking good. She's loving it. So it's so strange. But yeah, it's a wild ride. 4 out of 5, and I'll be checking out this guy's other stuff because I'm sure there's some more bizarre shit I need to check out.
Hell yeah. And for you,
Oh,
Sam?
this is like the highest 5 possible for me. Oh,
Nice.
yeah. This is one of my favorite.
I honestly feel like I
Yeah.
could get there.
It could get there, yeah.
I love this movie. I watched it late one night towards the end of October in 2019, and I was obsessed with it. I wanted to talk about it with everyone, and nobody really wanted to talk about it with me. I have a few friends who have seen it, but for some reason, they were not that interested in talking about it with me. I wonder why.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Well, thank you guys so much for letting me talk about this. Yeah, I think there's something to the way that it toys with the idea that men require women and directors require actresses to sort of desecrate themselves for pleasure as a kind of experiment, and that we viewers are plants sort of feeding off of this and relating to it. I love this movie. Sex is complicated and messy and is pulled with a lot of pain for me. So to see a movie that validates that pain while also examining how we deny it, and to see it operate in this language that is very close to my heart, this sort of gore and pornographic lens, I was so moved and genuinely like frightened and upset by everything that this movie brings to the table. And I don't know, it holds such a special place in my heart. And I also think just like formally it hits it out of the park. This is...
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't make this kind of movie, of course. Like, not that I make movies, but it is so special to me to feel, I guess I'm normally feel seen by something about like, hey, sex and desire within your own body is the worst. And is also just ecstatic and something inexplicable. And I think it gets to the heart of that better than most things I've seen in a way that is so much more direct and sort of in vernacular. So for me, total 5, like one of my favorite films ever. Oh, also, we forgot to talk about the fact, sorry, it becomes Mad Max for the last scene. Like the last scene is just a girl driving off into the sunset, like some sort of butch motorcycle lady, which
with her son or whatever. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, because she was also impregnated by the corpse that she was going at it with.
Wild.
Another necromantic tie-in. Beautiful.
Sorry, I forgot about that because that is wild. And it comes out of nowhere, and I love it.
Yeah, and they say that there's like a disease going on or something. They're like, there's less diseased people to the west or something like that. It's almost like it's like an apocalyptic kind of thing.
Yeah, I have no idea I don't know why it's there. I love it.
Yeah, I don't either.
But I have no idea why it's there.
Yeah, I know it had something to do with that she was going to continue to spread this drug through the child somehow. Because he took the remnants of the drug to like make sure that no one to basically make sure no one else could take it, and she said that it will continue through us and through supposedly this child.
Okay.
So I don't know if she plans to like intentionally infect everyone or something, or I don't know.
Okay,
that's awesome. Yeah, I love the imagery of it.
Sorry to just derail the like wrap up, but that was.
No, that was a necessary because I nearly forgot about that really odd last minute.
Yeah, just bizarre. But yeah, thank you guys so much for letting me talk about both of these movies.
Oh, absolutely.
I love them a
Thanks for
lot.
introducing them to us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, please. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, we were very glad for sure to have you on and to talk about these films, because every once in a while we need to get we spend too much time talking about like some of the films that are already sort of like canonized, that every once in a while it's really nice to hit up just like the straight dirt underground, where sometimes with something like Splatter you will find some of the most artful filmmaking or at least idiosyncratic personal filmmaking in this kind of realm. So we have a great time with stuff like this, even if both of these were absolutely disgusting.
In the best way.
Fuck yeah.
Hell yeah. But Sam, this is actually the part of the show where if you've got anything to plug, we usually let you do that. So if you want to plug Twitter or Letterboxd or anything like that, you can do that.
My Twitter is sbodrojan. It's SBODROJAN. Other than that, I mean, it's locked, but request me and I'll accept you. Yeah, sorry, I'm plugging a locked account, but I'll accept you. Yeah, this was a pleasure. I don't have anything really to promote right now, but this was really great. And I'm so thankful that someone let me and engaged with me over these two movies that fill my head on many days in a year that are not particularly well known.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much for introducing us and probably introducing a bunch of a few hundred other weirdos to some of these. I mean, we had a couple listeners who were very stoked that someone was bringing on films like these.
Yeah,
just
people
in
were just
general.
throwing up the cactus emoji over and over again.
Yes.
Fuck yeah.
It's definitely what I'll be doing from now on too.
Yeah, that's
I
my
saw
review.
the cactus emojis before I watched the film, and then I watched it and I was like, I understand.
Or
I
psychic
completely
cactuses out of
understand
5, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But for our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time with our bonus episode next week, where we are going to be taking on the horrors underneath the sort of American surface with one of High Class Society, in a film literally called Society from 1989, which has one of the most sort of insanely graphic sort of Lovecraftian horror finales about rich people orgies that you will ever see.
Man.
It is a great time, obviously directed by Brian Yesna, a regular collaborator with Stuart Gordon. So if you can imagine sort of like the body horror of something like From Beyond mixed with sort of rich 90210
Yeah. It could have
people.
been a prequel to Eyes Wide Shut or something. Or like a...
Yes, very similar
like a
to
brother or
that.
cousin.
Yeah, it's sort of like imagine Tom Cruise going into the sex orgy party in Eyes Wide Shut, but instead it's all like Cronenberg body horror.
Yeah,
that's kind of what Society is.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to be talking about alongside Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs.
Yeah.
Which has a little bit more to do with sort of gentrification and sort of Los Angeles class and racial tensions around landlords and property, which Wes Craven has sort of envisioned as a kind of a bit of a precursor to, I guess, kind of like the reveal in something like Parasite.
Yeah.
Of people literally living in the walls of the house, and there being maybe a cannibal element to it, a little bit of a Tobe Hooper quality, a little bit to it, a little bit as well. Either way, I was watching People Under Stairs for the first time, and I was pretty blown away, especially as someone who has seen like a lot of Craven.
Especially
it's
the
very
tones
different
that
even
it
for
tries
Craven.
to balance. It's ambitious in that sense, and I think he pulls it off. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about that next week for the Patreon exclusively. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And then the week after, we're going to have a special guest on to do the rare triple feature episode, which we sometimes allow. But we are going to be doing a triple feature episode on, weirdly enough, connects with People Under the Stairs. We're going to be doing Tobe Hooper. We're going to be talking about all of Tobe Hooper's films under the Canon contract that he got in the 80s, shortly after the success of Texas Chainsaw and Eaten Alive and The Funhouse and stuff like that.
Excellent.
So we're going to be talking about his sci-fi movie Life Force.
Awesome.
Another film called Invaders from Mars, which I haven't researched enough to say what it is, but sounds sci-fi as well. And then we're going to be capping it off, obviously, with the great Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which all three films were made under the Canon Films.
We're on our way to Chainsaw
banner.
Heaven, baby.
That's right.
Woo!
So we're going to be talking about all those films with a special guest in 2 weeks' time.
Beautiful.
That being said, I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.